Today, I'm going to teach you how to never lose a trade again. At least never make a trade you regret later on. You're making a trade that has even possibilities on both sides. I'm going to teach you how to do that with one simple exercise that you'll rinse and repeat on every time you make a trade. It'll help you with Dynasty even more so than redraft. It'll help you with draft pick related trades. Maybe you're rebuilding, you've got Christian McCaffrey, you don't know if you should get rid of him for 3 first-rounders. I'm going to take you through my step-by-step process on really how I came up with my trade calculator. I invented the first instant-based trade calculator in 2003, 2004 in the fantasy industry, and each and every year I improve it and make it better, more accurate, harder to beat, harder to trick, and everything, and a lot of what goes into the trade calculator goes into this thought process right here. So let's get into it. How to never make a bad trade ever again.
This is the Fantasy Football Show with your host, Smitty.
Top 5 running back. You're watching the Fantasy Football Show. I'm Smitty. Take a lap. This is going to feel a lot more simple than you might be thinking. Do what I'm instructing you to do here every single time you make a trade. And it won't fail you. At least it'll give you an even shot. The players could fail you. The trade could end up being bad, but you're not going to make one of those trades where you're like, oh my God, what was I thinking? The entire league's upset at you. You wake up the next morning and every day after for another week or two going, why did I make that trade? This will help prevent that. Now, whether you land your players, whether players get hurt in the deal, that is uncontrollable. But making a bad trade, making a trade you regret the next day, we're gonna solve that right now. Okay, so when making a trade, let's break down Christian McCaffrey. Let's say you want to trade Christian McCaffrey away. You're in a rebuild situation. You don't really want to have just one player, but you don't want to lose the value that McCaffrey currently has when you can make him a big trading piece right now. What do you do? Who do you go after? Do you go after draft picks? Do you go after a young running back like Jonathan Taylor? Do you go after a receiver like Ceedee Lamb? I think it's important to get like one piece involved in the trade, and let's say that it is Ceedee Lamb and draft picks. I had one follower on Discord bring this trade topic up specifically. Christian McCaffrey for, it was like 3 first-rounders, and Lamb wasn't yet involved, or it might have even been 4 first-rounders. And while that might look attractive at first, my question is, where are these picks going to be? Are any of them going to be in the top 3, top 4 overall? Because if they're not, if you can pretty much say, they're all going to be middle of the pack, maybe one of them could be top 4 or 5, then my answer is no, because 7 or 8 or 9 overall in a rookie draft is equivalent to, I don't know, like a $10 to $12 auction dollar player if you're spending money on in an auction draft right now in a dynasty league. So 9th, 8th, 7th, these picks do become more valuable. Like the 7 pick now is just a pick. It's a number, and let's say you equate it to like $9 in auction dollars. Once that becomes a player, like if you could tell me, Smitty, this is Kyle Pitts, nobody sees him coming by the time we draft, and I can get him at the number 7 pick, well then all of a sudden this number 7 vaults up to like a $25 value or something like that, because that's how good I see Pitts becoming in fantasy football. So much depends on like who you're getting, who's going to fall when you draft. So don't twist up what I'm saying. I'm not saying the 6, the 7, the 8 can't be good picks if the right player falls, but when you're making a trade for draft picks, you have to assume that these picks are going to be like $10, $11 type players at best in a startup dynasty auction dollar league. So that brings me to how I even evaluate player trades. Christian McCaffrey, if you break it down to auction dollars. Now, if you've never done an auction draft, this will be harder for you, but through practice, you'll get it down. But when you walk into an auction dollar draft, you're typically getting 200. You might get 300, you might get 250. Use the values that make sense for you, but most everybody does a $200. So how much is Christian McCaffrey worth in a $200 auction draft? Probably about 72 to 80, I don't know, $3, depending on how high, you know, running backs typically go. I've seen leagues where the top running backs go for like 67, and that's a steal. I'd scoop up 2 of them if they cost that amount. If they cost $90, which is possible, I've seen the top player overall go for half of the auction dollar value before. It just depends. But if we throw like a value of $68 on Christian McCaffrey, and then we can trickle down from there. So that's McCaffrey's value. We could say that Zeke Elliott, because of all the risk and unknowns with him, could go in the $51 range or $52 range. And then you got to ask yourself, well, how much of a difference is that in an auction draft? That's worth spending the difference when you're getting the guaranteed Christian McCaffrey versus the Zeke Elliott. And that's when you do an auction draft and you know, after the fact, are like, damn it, why did I spend, you know, so much money on that running back when I could have spent the extra amount of money I had hanging around at the end of the draft to upgrade to Christian McCaffrey? But the bottom line is you're getting a dollar value for a player. So Davante Adams, how much is Davante Adams worth in an auction league of $200? Probably around 50 to 55 bucks is what you're going to pay. I wouldn't be surprised if you went as high as 60 bucks in an auction draft, especially if it was redraft. Dynasty, there's some weird questions floating around right now about, well, what if A-Rod's not there? And I take full advantage of that with Adams. Adams is going to be fine for a handful of years, and I believe that A-Rod somehow, you know, they worked that out in Green Bay because it's expensive to get rid of him. Teams would have to way overpay to compensate for that expense that Green Bay is going to take, the hit they take by trading him. I firmly believe that's going to work itself out, and A-Rod and Adams will be connected in 2021 in Green Bay. So don't worry about that right now. We will obviously address that if news starts breaking on Adams. But if we throw a 68, let's even call this 70 to make the math make sense and really show the difference between the two players. Let's call this $70 and we'll call this 53. So we'll say Adams is $53. If you're trading Christian McCaffrey for Adams, you have to look at these numbers, 70 versus 53. If I'm getting rid of Christian McCaffrey, I can get myself Adams and another player. So let's say you're trading Christian McCaffrey for a bunch of picks, and you tell me, Smitty, there's probably a 5th in there, a 6th, a 7th, maybe this is going to be anywhere between the 6 and the 10. But I don't feel like I got any 1.1 overall draft picks. Well, then 4 picks doesn't matter to me. I'm not excited that you're getting 4 first rounders. Somebody might see that and go, oh, well, that's a possibility of getting some nice, you know, youth to rebuild. Who cares when you don't know where the picks are? If you can't tell me based on these teams that own these picks that that's going to be the 1 overall, probably that's going to be the top 3. This equates to probably like $10 to $12 maybe for these two guys here. So the 5th overall, the 6th overall, maybe they end up being like $10 to $15 type players in an auction draft. If you're auctioning these guys or throwing them into the player pool, the initial inaugural draft, you might be spending $10 to $15 on 1 or 2 of these guys. But like the 7th and 6th through 10 pick that you have here, these 2 first round picks, if you were to equate them to dollar values, might be like $9, $8, something like that. So you're getting a bunch of guys that aren't even in the $20 range for your number 1 overall player, Christian McCaffrey, who could go for $70 in an auction draft. If you're going to trade away Christian McCaffrey in a dynasty league, especially, you know, redraft, we'd be talking a little bit differently if the draft had already taken place. But in dynasty, let's say Christian McCaffrey, you want to rebuild. You do need and should want to go get a player like Ceedee Lamb, or go get a player like Jonathan Taylor. Go get a player like Calvin Ridley, who, again, how you start off with this trade is you say, if it is Lamb, how much is Lamb in an auction dollar draft? How much would Lamb go for? Right now, I would venture to say he's going to be sought after pretty heavily. The further we get into the season, the more sought after he'll be. But let's call it $38 even. Let's say somebody was willing to spend a ton of money on him because they see the upside. $38 to $40, somebody could spend that. But even if the entire league did want to overspend on Lamb, rightly so, you're still talking about like 30 to 30, so it's $32 difference between 70 and 38. So you have $32 to account for that you need to get in value. And so if you're going to get Lamb and you're getting a couple first round picks, a first round pick, like something like that, that might be worth it, but it's arguable because it does depend on where those picks are. If they're number 10, number 9, and number 8 overall, then you're going to be probably below $32 in value that you're getting with those draft selections. If you were to take these players that you drafted there, throw them in a fresh startup draft, and with a $200 purse, you're going to be spending probably less than $32 if these guys are like 9, 10, 7 overall. If one of them's number 3 overall, then obviously you could literally blow that entire number on that player. So if you told me, hey Smitty, I'm getting 1 first rounder that's going to be top 3, I take that over 3 first rounders where you don't have a good indication that you're even getting a top 5 pick. I'd rather have the 1 pick. I'd rather have that 1 number 3 overall. So if you take this first rounder, let's say it's the 1.3. Okay, let me make this more simple. So $38 Lamb, the 1.3, that to me is going to easily equal $25 to $35 because I think it's going to be DeVonta Smith, or it's going to be Jamar Chase, or you're going to get Harris, or the top running back. Let's say the top running back is another player other than Harrison. It definitely could be based on landing spot. That at least is going to give you the 1.3, a $25 to $35 type player. And now you're talking about being close to $70 overall value. But it takes that kind of deal to give up Christian McCaffrey. You don't give up Christian McCaffrey for 4 first rounders that have no promise of being top 3 overall picks. You just don't. If you use this process with every trade you do, again, you might miss on the players. They could get hurt. I can't guarantee that your evaluation that you have is going to be right, but you're at least going to, in your own mind, walk out of the trade happy. You're not going to regret what you're doing. So let's say you're trading Tyreek Hill away, which would command a lot. Tyreek Hill in an auction draft, again, we're going to talk about everything from a $200 purchasing perspective on an auction draft. Tyreek Hill is going to cost you $55 to $60. So if you're going to trade Tyreek Hill away, what are you going to get? Jonathan Taylor might cost you $55 to $60. So in a sense, if you're going to trade Hill for a running back, JT would probably qualify straight up. If you're in rebuild mode, and let's say you wanted J.K. Dobbins, J.K. Dobbins is going to cost far less. Dobbins would probably be, if I had to guess, and this is me spitballing the auction dollar values here in January, but I'd say $15 to $20 is what you'd be spending if you're buying JK. It could go as high as 25. Again, spitballing this really early, and that leaves you a good $25 to $30 to spend on another player. That leaves you a Ceedee Lamb. So you can get JK and Lamb for Hill. That leaves you a Josh Allen if you had no quarterback. And even if this is a 1 QB league, I'm not talking 2 QB league, Allen would have more value. You'd have a $70 value or $60 value in a 2 QB league, $200 auction. But in a 1 QB league, you could get JK and Allen. Let's use the 1.3 and say we want that to be DeVonta Smith. So we're taking the rookie wide receiver, we're downgrading, quote unquote, into Smith. The 1.3 probably would equate to, if I'm spitballing that here, I don't know, $30 to $35 could be the value of that 1.3 pick. So this affords you maybe a Swift. You could get a $25 to $30 player potentially with that 1.3. Maybe not, but you're not doing a deal. You're not giving up this guy right here that commands $50 to $60 in auction dollar values for anything less. That's how you walk out of the trade or the no trade with peace of mind. Where people get in trouble is where they say, well, I'm in rebuild mode, you know, I want to get rid of Hill. What if Hill gets hurt? They start getting into all these what ifs in their mind, and then they go ahead and they trade Hill for just the 1.3 and let's say a second rounder as well, which is garbage. That's like a $5 to like $7 auction dollar type player. So just throw a second rounder out the window. Don't even consider that. That shouldn't move the meter. But people will actually make this trade because they feel like, well, I have nothing else I can do. Well, then don't make a trade. Sometimes the best trade is no trade at all. And you have to account for that extra $20 to $30 player or pieces, or it doesn't make sense. This would be great for somebody that had on their team Herbert and Josh Allen, which, believe it or not, for whatever reason, a lot of people that own one of those guys own both. And so you could get one of these guys, let's say it's Herbert, and the 1.3 for Hill. That would equate and at least be an even swap in terms of perceived dollar value based on a $200 auction. Now, let's say you're trading away James Robinson. James Robinson's going to command anywhere between $40 and $50 in auction dollars out of a $200 purse. So if you want to go after like a Ridley as an example, Ridley's probably going to command the $40 to $50. You have to do an even type swap. The same thing for DK Metcalf. You're not going to be able to get DK just because James Robinson's a running back. You're going to have to pay that amount for DK. If you want to do any kind of like rebuilding, it's going to be J-Rob for that 1.3, for that 1.2, which again is about $25 to $30, whatever we said earlier, and that affords you potentially another $10 to $15 of wiggle room that might be a quarterback. It might be a future first rounder in 2022. That would kind of make sense. That would have me not walking out thinking, oh, I got blasted on this because this player alone could outscore Robinson. And that brings me to my last point. My last point is when you're doing a 1 for 2 players and you're getting the 2 players, you want to always make sure that the 2 players you're getting, each of them in their own right, could be as good as the player that you're giving up. So in the case of Tyreek Hill, if you're giving up Tyreek Hill and you're getting Ceedee Lamb over here and another player, Lamb by himself could, I'm not saying he will, I'm saying he could be as good as Tyreek Hill, at least in time, but maybe even right away. Look at Justin Jefferson. Lamb could be that good. So if this player gets hurt or doesn't work out or busts, you're still left in a pretty good position of arguing that your trade could make sense still, even if one of the pieces fell off the face of the earth. That's how you walk out of a trade not regretting the deal, especially if you can get another player. Like, let's say you got Pitts involved in that. That would be insane. I would take Lamb and Pitts over Hill in a heartbeat in a dynasty scenario, whether I'm rebuilding or not. If we use 2 different players here, let's use McLaurin as an example, because this will probably allow us to get an even bigger player here than in the previous example. Or you could even say the 1.4 or 1.3 or something with McLaurin. And this pick right here, let's say it's Jamar Chase, and let's even call it the 1.3 to make sure we're for sure getting. No, let's call it the 1.4, because what if it's Pitts? What if it's Jamar Chase, it's DeVonta Smith, or it's Pitts and one of the running backs will definitely be gone because everybody's so running back hungry in rookie drafts. You can guarantee that if you've got the 1.4, at least one running back will be gone, maybe even 2. So you're looking at Pitts in a worst case scenario. You're looking at Chase maybe in a best case scenario, or DeVonta Smith. Both of these guys have the potential to be as good as Tyreek Hill. Of course, my bet is going to be that Hill's better than both of these guys individually, but the opportunity's there for you to potentially get a guy on both sides that could compete with that if one of them fell off the face of the earth. That's how you walk out of every trade if you're doing a 1 player diluting into 2 without ever feeling like you made a mistake or regret it later on. So to conclude, let's do the flip side. Let's say you're trading 2 players for 1. Well, just make sure that that player you're getting here feels to you like that's not possible. If you're giving up 2 players here, let's say Jerry Jeudy, and I think people are way too hard on Jeudy coming out of his rookie year, and let's say the running back you're giving up is Gibson. So if Jeudy and Gibson are the two players you're giving up, this player has to be a player that feels like these guys individually can't compete with him. And together, if they both blow up, is the only shot that the deal will be a wash. So both of these guys have to blow up to make this deal work. Don't do a trade unless you feel that way. So if it's JT, make sure you feel confident that JT's a level above Gibson, a level above Jeudy, and you're not looking at that scenario where you're regretting it based on Gibson alone. And then later on, you regret the trade again based on Jeudy alone. And each of these guys ends up being better than that guy. I'm not saying that about JT. I'm saying make sure you feel that way about JT if you're making that trade. Like, don't go doing this for Eckler, who I like, but Gibson has as much upside as Eckler in a sense. Jeudy has as much upside in a sense. You can't be doing that kind of trade. You will regret it. Even if it's Aaron Jones, a guy I think everyone should really pump the brakes on because we don't know what's going to happen, where he's going to go. He does so much with just limited touches. What if he gets more touches? Will he get hurt? I don't like doing this kind of trade for even Aaron Jones because Gibson alone has as much upside as Jones. Jeudy could. This name for me would have to be like in the Chubb variety, in the Justin Jefferson variety. It has to be, or I'm not doing that kind of deal. And the last point I'd say is write your trades out. If you, let's say, have Allen at quarterback, and let's say you have Zeke, Jefferson, Lamb, JK here, and JT here, and this is your team right here. Write it out. And if you make a trade, also write it out and see what it looks like with the exact same formatting so that your eyes don't get tricked into, like, you know, having running backs below here and wide receivers up here. Like, write it out in the same format and see if you like your team better. So if you're trading away, you trade Zeke away and you upgrade him into CMC, but that gets rid of JK, and now instead of JK, you have a Chark to throw in there. Write it out, look at it, and visually make sure you're seeing an improvement and you're not seeing a downgrade. And then look at your team and be like, yeah, you know, I do like that. Zeke and JK for Christian McCaffrey, and I'm pulling Chark from my bench up into this spot. So it's basically you're trading CMC for Zeke and JK. And based on how the team looks, I would do that trade. Even though JK's got a ton of upside, Zeke's got a ton of upside, this does a lot for you because you've got Chark sitting on the bench who can come right in. Hopefully that'll help you avoid making a trade you at least regret come you know, a week or a day or an hour after you make the trade. Far too many people come to me and say, hey, I can't believe I made this, or oh my God, Smitty, am I making a mistake? And my first thought is, if you believe that, you probably are. Best to back away if you feel that way. This will help stave off any of those bad ideas you might be gravitating toward, and this process, rinse and repeat, will help you avoid making a regretful trade every single time if you use the process, trust the process, and think it out in a $200 auction type environment. Subscribe, follow, tell your grandma, tell your friends, tell everybody about the show, and get on over to HeySmitty.com, where I've got everything Smitty wrapped up in one. My SleeperU.com, where you can get your breaking news from me with dynasty and redraft takes attached to every single piece of news I post. My links to everything else, my social media, and my HeySmitty.com, where again we can actually go through in detail and find a trade that best fits your team. HeySmitty.com.
This is the Fantasy Football Show with your host, Smitty.
Top 5 running back. You're watching the Fantasy Football Show. I'm Smitty.